What's up guys, the World Cup 2026 group stage has finally wrapped up. So in this video, I'm going to predict the entire knockout stage for the rest of this tournament. But first, let's quickly go over the results of all of the groups. For Group A, I thought my prediction was derailing when South Korea won and South Africa lost. But somehow I got the top two correct in the end. Bafana slowly improved with every match, whereas the Tiger Warriors did pretty much the opposite. But when they faced each other on the final match day, the African outfit came out on top to make the knockouts for the first time in history. I still can't deny underestimating the Koreans, whom I originally saw as a rock-bottom contender, which is why I was so impressed with their opener against Czechia. Otherwise, no surprise for Mexico, home field advantage was real and they deservingly topped the group. Group B is the first one that I got correct for every single position. Again, after the first match day, I thought it was derailing too, but Switzerland and Canada locked in to clinch the top two spots. Bosnia also made history after beating Qatar to earn a ticket to the knockouts. Shout out to the Maroons though, as they claimed their first ever World Cup point by holding the best team of the group on paper to a draw. Otherwise, there's not much to talk about here, as like I said, I correctly predicted Group B's entire standings. Which is also the case for Group C, a rather interesting one but quite easy to predict. Brazil's draw with Morocco was the wake-up call for Ancelotti to make changes, and he surely did. Vinicius Jr. and Matheus Cunha now run the Seleção's frontline, as they are in fact Brazil's only scorers so far. Anyone facing the Italian Mafia will surely have trouble pocketing these two attacking stars. The real contest was definitely between Morocco and Scotland, but even then I saw the fake AFCON champions coming out on top. They've been on a rise of their own lately. Another shout out to Haiti. Despite being the first team grouped in this World Cup, they gave Morocco a run for their money in that final game. They were leading 2-1 right before halftime. Group D was an absolute disaster. Ever since Euro 2020, countless people have fallen for the Turkey dark horse trap. And now that includes me. I honestly expected too much from them going into this tournament. And by the time they actually scored and beat the US, it was already too late. Conversely, I admit to underestimating the Americans and wasn't at all familiar with Pochettino's game. After all, he was the coach who led Tottenham to a Champions League final in 2019. So I guess his potential for success have never gone. On a side note, I'm glad I didn't rule out Australia in this one. The Socceroos didn't overwhelm by any means, but did just enough to advance, especially following that statement victory against Turkey. Paraguay sort of underperformed in my opinion. Not as great as they were in qualification, but at least they still advanced. Group E was slightly tricky. Germany topped it like I expected, but what I didn't expect was them losing to Ecuador. But other than this win, Ecuador didn't impress me at all with their previous two fixtures, a loss to the Ivory Coast and draw against debutant Curaçao. It wasn't until their final game that they scored, not quite the underdog potential that I saw in them. I also must admit, the Ivory Coast were fantastic. Even though they lost to Germany, they still had the lead for a good portion of that game. As for Curaçao, I know they got grouped, but for a debutant who was the smallest World Cup participant in both size and population, they punched well above their own weight. Eloy Room's heroics against Ecuador gained him so many Instagram followers, and his teammates were delighted to be on the big stage, for sure. Group F was the ultimate toss of a coin. Japan was my number one dark horse pick, and even though they couldn't overcome the Netherlands, the football they played against the Orange and Tunisia still somewhat justifies my hopes. The Blue Samurai were by far the best Asian team at this World Cup, always delivering even when other teams from the continent were dropping points left and right. The biggest shock for me though has to be the Netherlands. The World Cup squad didn't look flashy like previous years, but players like Somerville, Brobbey and Gakpo made my jaws drop. They are part of a team that can go far, for sure. Sweden and Tunisia didn't surprise me at all. They were where I predicted them to be. Group G is where I was finally correct again. Like some of the earlier groups, seeing a bunch of draws made me think this one could derail, but it didn't. I would say Belgium replicated their pre-tournament form in that 5-1 defeat of New Zealand, but alongside Egypt, I believe they did just enough to go through. Both of them got their only wins against the same team, who had just returned to the world stage after 16 years, so I'm not too impressed about any of them. A little heartbreaking for Iran, they couldn't score a last-minute winner against the Pharaohs and missed out on automatic qualification for the knockouts. Otherwise, everything about Group G went according to plan. The center of attention for Group H has got to be Cape Verde. I predicted them to finish above Saudi Arabia, but never did I ever think they would be runners-up, outperforming Uruguay in the process. Just like Curacao, for a World Cup debutant, the Blue Sharks punched far above their own weight, even holding European champions Spain to a draw. Speaking of La Roja, they failed to win their opening game, but Luis de la Fuente fixed his tactical flaws as Lamine Yamal and co topped the group. Saudi Arabia understandably didn't stand a chance, but by far the biggest disappointment is Uruguay. I have no idea how Marco Bielsa could screw up that bad with Valverde, Nunez, and many other great players at his disposal. Uruguay as a team has fallen from the grace of 2010. The group of death turned out to be the most predictable. Group I's supposed thriller between France and Norway didn't live up to the hype, as Norway rested most of their key players, which ended up giving Le Bleu an easy win. Honestly, I don't have much to say about this one. There were no draws, so the games weren't too evenly matched, and ironically, it's usually the groups of death that you can predict accurately. Group J was relatively straightforward. The one team that I personally ruled out was Algeria, but they ended up overcoming Jordan. I think I had a little too much hope for the latter, considering their incredible rise ever since the last Asian Cup, but seeing as they scored in all of their matches, they did quite well for their weight. Argentina still got it, Messi's cooking just like he did in Qatar, officially becoming the all-time World Cup scorer. As for Austria, all I want to say is that they finished where they should be. Now, what do I say for Group K? Portugal, despite all the expectations, didn't top the group. I thought after Ronaldo returned to form after that brace against Uzbekistan, he would lead his team to first place. But Colombia proved why they are one of my underdog picks for this year. People have been constantly dreaming about Portugal's trophy, but in this group alone, I've always kept an eye on Colombia, knowing they are not to be taken for granted. DR Congo also impressed me with decent fights against the favorites before beating Uzbekistan and go through. Speaking of the White Wolves, this group was quite rough for them. They fell victim to Ronaldo's redemption and also lost the other two games. I'm sure they'll do better next time. Finally, I was correct about Group L. Like so many others, I thought it was going south when England drew Ghana, and on the final day, Croatia was topping the group for a while. But everything lined up in the end, as the Three Lions did enough to progress. That isn't to say they won't face heavy criticism though. Croatia v Ghana was the real tug of war here, but Modric and co reminded everyone why they finished in the top 3 the last 2 editions. Ghana still did fine and went through as they deserved. And as for Panama, although they couldn't score, at least they didn't get stat padded by England like 8 years ago. Right before we predict the knockout stage, let's run through the third place teams quickly. Out of my chosen 8, Iran and Scotland didn't make it despite finishing third in the groups, whereas Czechia couldn't advance either but because they were rock bottom. I expected Paraguay and Ecuador to finish second, but they ended up third, but they made the last 32 anyway. Algeria was supposed to be grouped, but they obviously overcame Jordan, and Australia qualified automatically. Overall, I would say my third place predictions were moderately correct. Now that we've went over every single group, it's time to start predicting the knockout stage. Now I am back on the FIFA World Cup 2026, well, what do you say, bracket challenge? Yeah. And so I'm going to be predicting the entire knockout stage here. My mouse is a little bit glitchy. I could use this instead to scroll up and down, if that helps. Okay, let's just get straight to it. So, at the top of this bracket, we have Germany and Paraguay. Now, like I said, Germany, they didn't do too well in the group stage. I know they beat Curacao in the Ivory Coast. The win against Curacao was a big one, but they did lose to Ecuador. So I guess, that is some kind of problem for Nagelsmann because they already lost to a South American outfit, and Paraguay is from South America. But even then, I don't think Paraguay is really a big deal for Germany because they, like I said earlier, didn't really truly deliver. Like they lost to the US, they drew Australia, and they did beat Turkey, but they weren't quite the team that beat Argentina in qualification. So I think this is going to be a rather comfortable win for Germany. I'd say it ends 2-0. And then we move on to France and Sweden. We are finally seeing Mbappe face up against Victor Gyökeres. I think this is the first time they ever face each other. Like, yeah, because Madrid hasn't faced Arsenal since last year, and Gyökeres wasn't at Arsenal back then. Now, I think it's pretty clear that France is going to win this one because I know Sweden has a few good players like Gyökeres, Isak, Elanga has been on fire as well. But France, like if you just look at the attack, you know they're gonna win. Like France is clear of Sweden in terms of squad depth, and usually it's the team with squad depth that go through. So I say this finishes 3-1 for Le Bleu. I say at least two players will score for France. Mbappe could get on the score sheet, and I think Gyökeres could score as well, but it won't be enough. And then we have South Africa versus Canada. It's a bit unfortunate that Canada isn't playing this match at home. Had they finished at the top of Group B, they would have played at home for a few knockout matches, but they didn't, and so that's why they have to travel to Los Angeles to face South Africa. Now, Bafana, they lost to Mexico in the opener, which it is a host nation, and also, more importantly, one from CONCACAF. And this is a CONCACAF team that they're facing in the round of 32. But they did also beat South Korea in the final game to barely, well, it wasn't too close because they did finish second, but they automatically made the knockout stage by beating South Korea, which is quite impressive. And speaking of South Korea, they didn't actually make it past the group stage. So I guess that's kind of a sad ending for Son Heung-min. So yeah. And as for Canada, they beat Qatar 6-0, but right before that, they had a draw with Bosnia, yes. And they also lost to Switzerland in the end. But I think, considering the stars that they have, like Jonathan David and Alfonso Davies, though I'm not sure how well he will be going into that game, I think Canada has what it takes, and they're going to go through. And then we have the Netherlands versus Morocco, probably one of the best matches of this stage. Now, the Netherlands, I will admit I underestimated them. I looked at their World Cup squad and thought they didn't bring that many stars. I know they have many good players like Van Dijk and Gakpo, but I didn't expect lesser names like less well-known names like Brobbey or Somerville to shine for the Orange. And this one's pretty close. Like Morocco, I'm sure you saw how they held Brazil after a draw. But the one selling point is that they kind of struggled against Haiti. They were trailing behind two times. Yeah. And I know they won in the end, but defensively they had a lot of errors. And that's why I think going up against the Netherlands forwards, they're gonna fold. So I say the Netherlands come out on top. And oh yeah, I should be mentioning the scores for this one. So I think the Netherlands, they're gonna win. Let's go with 3-2. I don't see it going to extra time. And as for Canada, I think they'll win 2-1. It's a close one. Okay, and now we have Portugal versus Croatia. Um, when they last faced each other in the Nations League, in the first game, when Portugal played at home, Cristiano Ronaldo reached the 900 goal milestone, and now he's on the way to reach 1,000. And Portugal, as you can tell, they weren't too convincing in the group stage. They failed to beat DR Congo. They bounced back against Uzbekistan, but they recently had a draw with Colombia, and that is obviously once again putting pressure on them. And Croatia is not a team to underestimate either. I know they lost the opening game to England, but they had convincing victories against Panama and Ghana. And especially in major competitions, Croatia has never been an easy opponent for Portugal. I'm sure this will remind some people of the 2016 round of 16 match in the Euros, where Portugal had to win through a Quaresma win goal in extra time, and eventually they went on to win the Euros. And and oh yeah, we're also getting a reunion between Ronaldo and Modric. They were teammates at Real Madrid for many years. But that aside, I think Portugal will just go through. I heard some people say that when they face off against big teams, they actually play well. I don't know if that really is true. And personally, I make my predictions based on what actually is in front of me. Like I don't make predictions based on how teams could be at a certain point. I just predict based on what they've already shown me. But even then, I think Portugal will take the win here. And then we have Spain versus Austria. Do I even need to say anything? Um, Spain is going to win this game. Oh yeah, I keep having to remind myself. I think Portugal will beat Croatia 2-1. And Spain, they're going to win 2-0. Um, they weren't too good. Like they weren't outstanding in the group stage, but I think La Roja has what it takes to get an easy win against Austria. So moving on, we have the other host nation, the USA, against Bosnia. Now, what do I have to say? Bosnia lost 4-1 to Switzerland. That was a pretty heavy defeat, but they did bounce back against Qatar. They did hold Canada to a draw, which is quite interesting because Canada is a co-host and CONCACAF team. But I think the US is a different story. They've been on a rise in this tournament, and especially with the home field advantage, they're gonna go through. I say the US wins 2-1, and I could see it going. I could see it going to extra time. It's quite evenly matched. And then we have Belgium and Senegal in Seattle. Now, Belgium, they were held to draws against Egypt and Iran, and their only win came against New Zealand, who was obviously the weakest team in the group. So, I'm not too convinced about their group stage performance just yet. As for Senegal, well, they lost to France and Norway, but they did bounce back against Iraq. But I feel like that's kind of a similar story to Belgium because they obviously beat the weakest team in the group, and mind you, Iraq hasn't didn't qualify for the World Cup for 40 years. So this generation, that team that lost to Senegal didn't really have the World Cup experience just yet. So it wasn't too surprising that Senegal beat them. So these two teams are kind of similar situations actually, but I still see Belgium coming out on top. I think this will be a 3-2 win for the Red Devils, but it will go to extra time. And then another really exciting one: Brazil versus Japan. Now, back in October, Japan beat Brazil in a friendly. The Seleção were 2-0 up at halftime, but the Blue Samurai came back. They scored 3 goals in the second half and won at home. But this is something I've always been saying. Brazil tend to be far more serious in major competitions. Ancelotti is going to lock in and he's going to raise his eyebrow. And, I do rate Japan highly. I've made a video about them before. I say that they are my number one dark horse pick for this tournament. But going up against Brazil, I think this is going to be a little too much for Hajime Moriyasu and his men. So it's not easy for me to say this. I think Japan will go out in the round of 32. It won't be an easy win for Brazil though. I say they win 3-2 in extra time. And then we have the Ivory Coast against Norway. Um, this one's quite interesting actually. The Ivory Coast, if you remember, they beat France in a friendly right before the World Cup, and then they put up a good fight against Germany, and also beat Ecuador and Curacao. And Norway, on the other hand, there's something worth mentioning about them. They rested almost the entire squad against France, and so the players are physically well rested. And you do also have to remember that they beat Senegal and Iraq. I mean, both teams won two group matches anyway. But I think Norway has what it takes to win. It won't be an easy win. I say this one ends 2-1 for the Vikings. And I can see Erling Haaland scoring both of Norway's goals in this one. Moving on to Mexico versus Ecuador. I'm not even going to say anything here. I'm just going to straight up choose Mexico. First of all, they're playing at home. Second of all, Ecuador didn't live up to the dark horse hype that I had for them. So this one should be a 1-0 for El Tri. And they will finally overcome El Quinto Partido. Then, moving to Atlanta, we have England versus DR Congo. Now, considering how the Three Lions were quite troubled against Ghana and Panama, this one is much closer than many of you might think. Especially considering DR Congo also helped Portugal to a draw. They put up a good fight against Colombia as well for most of that game. And obviously, they did beat Uzbekistan to advance. So this one is not going to be easy. I think England still has what it takes to win, but it's going to be a tight one, just like how they beat Panama. I think their only goal will come in the second half, and they will go through 1-0. Then looks like we got four more matches. Yes, we do. Okay. Argentina versus Cape Verde. Woo! The reigning champions versus one of the four debutants of the World Cup. Wow. I was expecting Uruguay to be here so we could set up a South American derby, but Uruguay fumbled, like I said. So, yeah, it's just Cape Verde against Argentina. I would love to see Vozinha shine and potentially stop some Messi penalties or even free kicks. I would love to see that happen. And people are hyping up I mean, no, Cape Verde actually, but being the objective predictor I am, I'm gonna side with Argentina. I think they win 3-0. Messi will score at least one goal, but I think for the other two, he will leave it to his teammates. Then another really evenly matched one here: Australia versus Egypt. I see some people siding with Australia here, and I think they have a point. Australia beat Turkey. Well, I mean, maybe that win wasn't too surprising, considering Turkey is dark horse trap. Um, I think I shouldn't side with Egypt too much here. Their only win was against New Zealand, who is undoubtedly one of the weakest teams of this World Cup. And otherwise, they drew with Belgium and Iran is an Asian team. So yeah, I know Egypt has more star power than the Socceroos, but this is not going to be an easy one. I say the Pharaohs go through, but they barely win, and I think they win this one 2-1. Then we have Switzerland versus Algeria. Ooh, really interesting one here. I think Switzerland will win. Um, as much as I am impressed with Algeria due to some of their performances, I think Switzerland is still the kind of the big dog these days. They've overthrown some world giants before, like France or Italy in the last two Euros. So I think they will win this one 2-0. How about that? And to end off the round of 32, we have Colombia versus Ghana. Ooh, pretty fun one. Ghana, they impressed against England. They put up good fight against Croatia. They also beat Panama. But if you saw how Colombia played against Portugal, you already know I'm going to take them. I say they win 2-0. All right, let's go all the way back to the top. And now we have the round of 16. So, starting off with Germany versus France. I can't believe we are getting such a thriller this early on. Um, Normally, it's not very often that this kind of matchup happens in the round of 16, but because technically this is the second stage of the knockouts, it's possible. Otherwise, this would not in a 32 team World Cup. This would only happen usually in the quarterfinals. But due to the tight selection, we are getting it now. And if you look at both teams' group stage performance, need I say more? France will win. I say they win 3-1. It's going to be a pretty big win for Le Bleu, and they're gonna knock Germany out. And then we have Canada versus the Netherlands. Canada still cannot play at home, and that's why the Netherlands are gonna win. I see a big win for the Orange here. They're gonna put 4 goals past Canada, so 4-0 for Ronald Koeman and co. Then this one is gonna give me the most headache, at least out of the round of 16 matchups. Portugal have already beaten Spain in the Nations League final last year, but Spain were a little bit more convincing in the World Cup group stages. Their wingers are definitely better than Portugal's, and yeah, it's going to be a pretty rough task for Roberto Martinez. There's a lot of pressure on the European Seleção, be it Martinez's conservativeness, um, Ronaldo's form as well. I know he scored a brace against Uzbekistan, but of course the pressure is always on him. And I know people have been saying that it's when Portugal is pressured and down bad that they play really well. But I know this is gonna break a lot of Ronaldo fans' hearts. And it's hard for me to say as well because I do analyze Ronaldo. I predict purely based on what I have already seen, not how teams could be in certain situations. I'm not gonna choose Portugal just because I think they can be good when it matters. I I I pick these teams based on how they already did. So it's more of a descriptive view of these teams, not a prescriptive one. I don't see teams based on what they can be, but what they actually are. And for that reason, I'm gonna give it to Spain. Ronaldo is unfortunately not going to win the World Cup, considering Portugal's current form. If they do get a convincing performance against Croatia, and conversely Spain struggle against Austria, I could change my mind. But for now, I see Spain going through. It's going to be a close one. I say they win 3-2 in extra time. But other than that, I think Ronaldo will go out. And I know it's going to be really upsetting for everyone. And then we have the United States versus Belgium. Belgium already beat the USA 5-2 in a March friendly, and that's all I need. I think they're going to win this one 2-0. I could see a thriller like the 2014 round of 16. Oh, which is ironic because this is a round of 16 actually. But Belgium is simply going to overcome the United States. And Donald Trump won't be too happy about that. Now, Norway is the only team so far that has never lost to Brazil, ever. Like, not even in friendlies or World Cups. But we are in 2026, and Brazil is a much better team. They are a different breed now. I know Erling Haaland has been on fire lately, and that Norway has the potential to make it far as an underdog. But as with so many other teams, I think Brazil has the advantage in terms of squad depth. They have more stars in their squad, and so I think Brazil is going to win 2-1. Yes, I think they will win this game 2-1 against Norway. And then we move on to Mexico versus England. This will be immense pressure for Thomas Tuchel because they're playing it at Mexico City, and I'm sure you know how big of an atmosphere the Mexicans can create at their home stadiums. But personally, I still think England has what it takes. to go through here. Um, I think Mexico as a team still doesn't have what it takes to truly challenge one of the world's biggest teams. So I think England will win 1-0, just 1-0. And then we have Argentina versus Egypt. Ooh, Messi is potentially facing Mohamed Salah here. I think Argentina is going to win this one pretty comfortably. I don't see how Egypt can overcome the Albiceleste's friendship and chemistry. So Argentina is going to win 2-0. Let's leave it at that. And then we have Switzerland versus Colombia. Ooh, this is kind of a hot take here. I'm gonna choose Colombia over Switzerland. I think Colombia's performances against Portugal, especially, says a lot about them and the underdog potential. I've already brought this up before in a previous video, and I think Colombia would just go through. And you know what? I think this game will go to penalties. My gut feeling is saying that this match will randomly go to penalties. I know Kobo is a great goalkeeper, but even then, I think Colombia will win this one. It's probably going to be a 1-0 draw, and then Colombia win like 4-3 on penalties. Yeah, I think it's about time that we start bringing penalty shootouts into the equation here. So we go all the way back up, and now we have the quarterfinals. France is facing yet another European outfit in the Netherlands. Now, this is a really good one. Both teams are in really good form and shape. The Netherlands, you already saw how good they were in the group stage against Sweden and Tunisia. And if all goes to plan, well, France is going to face Sweden as well. And I think France has a slight advantage here. Their attack is unmatched in this World Cup. And I will admit, though, the Netherlands has a pretty good defense. And so it's going to be a really interesting clash between France's attack and the Netherlands' defense. But I see France going through here. And I think, oddly enough, this one will go to penalties. So 2-2 for both teams, but France win 4-3 on penalties. I know MacLeod is a pretty good shot stopper. He literally saved a penalty against Norway in the final group game. So that's your evidence. Okay, now we go down and we get Spain versus Belgium. Ooh, Lamine Yamal is facing Kevin De Bruyne. I don't think that much has ever happened before, but it will. Now, obviously, I'm gonna get the edge to Spain here. I don't see how Belgium can go anywhere further than the quarterfinals. Um, yeah, especially considering the group stage performances. I keep bringing this up, but they just don't have what it takes. And honestly, up until the quarterfinals, they haven't really been tested that much. Like they haven't really faced any real challenges, and so I don't think they're gonna overcome Spain here. So La Roja will win 2-0. And then we have an absolute thriller, Brazil versus England. Now, in my last prediction video, I said England were going to beat Brazil. But this is going to be my biggest 180-degree turn, or should I say, my biggest U-turn here. I think Brazil will knock out England. I can already imagine the England fans going after me. They're gonna assassinate me and probably um okay, you know, I don't want to go too deep into that. But yeah, I think Brazil is just really good right now. Ancelotti is always a masterclass when it comes to knockout football. And yeah, for that reason, Brazil will beat England 2-1. It's gonna go to extra time. And then we actually have a CONMEBOL derby here, Argentina versus Colombia. This is the the recreation of Copa America 2024's final. But I don't think anything is going to change here. I know Colombia is really good as a team right now. They've got Luis Diaz, one of the best wingers in the world currently. But Argentina, their chemistry is just on another level. And so I think they will beat Colombia 1-0. So we go all the way back up for the semifinals. And now, the one match that has not changed at all is France versus Spain. Now, if you judge purely based on the group stage performances, something that I've brought up like 100 times already, France could beat Spain. But you have to remember that over the past 2 years, Spain have faced France in two semifinals. First, it was the Euros and then the Nations League. And Spain won both times. And I think they're going to do it again. I know they aren't too overwhelming, like they aren't overwhelmingly powerful like they were in those last tournaments, but I think they have what it takes to overcome Le Bleu. um, I think France is going to need more than just star power in the attack to beat Spain. Spain is a different story. They are not as easy as the likes of what the Netherlands or Germany or Sweden. Yeah, I think Spain will win 2-1. Now, if we go down here, we have another thriller here: Brazil versus Argentina. I remember this was a really popular prediction for the 2022 semifinals. We would have gotten a South American derby, but Croatia obviously prevented that from happening. But we could potentially be seeing it again in this year's World Cup as Brazil faces off against Argentina. Now, do I think Argentina's chemistry can still overcome Brazil's star power? I would say yes. Lionel Scaloni is somehow still keeping that 2022 World Cup winning squad alive. They have been flawless, honestly, and so I think Argentina is going to knock out Brazil. I could see Neymar face Messi here. That will be a really interesting reunion for the two of them. I think Argentina is going to win 1-0, and I think it won't go to extra time. And so that would right before we get to the final, that means we would get a third place match between France and oops, I went a little too far down, and between France and Brazil. And I think France will win 2-1. No, 3-1. I think France can score a lot of goals against Brazil. The Silly South defense isn't amazing, to be honest. But we move on to the final, and now we get Spain versus Argentina. This was supposed to be the finalissima back in March, but due to some Middle Eastern conflicts, it was postponed. But I suppose we can watch it here at the World Cup in the final. Lamine Yamal is facing the man that bathed him so many years ago. In other words, he is facing Lionel Messi. Um, the number 10 of Barcelona's past is now facing the number 10 of the current Barcelona. What an amazing story that would be. And I think I've said this before, I don't really believe in teams winning competitions back to back, especially for like spaced out tournaments like the World Cup. The reason why it's hosted once every 4 years is to kind of prevent teams from winning it over and over again. Like your team gets older, opponents will figure out your tactics, and it's just going to become exponentially harder to win it back to back. And so I think Spain is going to win this final. I say we go for a little thriller here. 3-2 for Spain. It goes to extra time, and I can see Messi scoring at least one goal, maybe two. And I hope Yamal will score in it as well. And so that is going to be my World Cup 2026 winner, Spain, just like last time. I meant just like my last prediction video. It has not changed. Spain is going to win the World Cup. My mind has not changed in terms of the ultimate end result. But as you can see, for some of the other matches, my mind has changed a lot. Well, not much up here, but if you just look at the bottom half of this bracket, you can see some matchups have changed massively because I see them really differently now. But yeah, if you just look at some of these games, I'm sure there are some really good matches for you to watch, and I hope we do get to see some of these thrillers to make the most of this World Cup. Yeah, that will complete my prediction knockout stage World Cup prediction video. Um, After the round of 32, I might consider making individual prediction videos for each of these knockout stages. Like for example, once the round of 32 is done, I could make a video for the round of 16 and then the quarterfinals, semifinals, and stuff. Because like there is a good chance that I get some of these predictions wrong, and then the round of 16 matchups look really different than what they are here on my screen. And so I could try and make like different video styles for those prediction videos. I'm definitely gonna make a bunch of shorts. Can't be bothered to make too many long form videos for them. But yeah, I'm gonna have to think about that. Otherwise, I know you guys are gonna roast me in the comments for how delusional I am to some of you. I see that coming. But thank you guys for watching my video. I really appreciate it if you made it this far. If you like my content, please make sure to consider at least subscribing and liking this video, and of course sharing your opinions on the knockout stage of this World Cup. And I'll see you next time.